You're listening to the Frankly Podcast. To submit a question to the podcast, go to franklypodcast.co.nz. This episode is kindly supported by the fabulous women at Bonk Lube. Hi, I'm Jen, and when I was growing up, I thought that my body was going to look exactly like my mum's, but it turns out my breasts are like 3 times the size of hers. And it took me a little while to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to have these tiny, beautiful little breasts. But I'm very happy with them now. So, yeah. And you are?
I'm Rogena Stirling, and I'm an intersex person, or as we've coined here at my workplace, he tangata Aotearoa, which means a person of 2 life essences.
Oh, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
And yes, I'm a PhD graduate, so I'm the first intersex person in New Zealand to have a PhD.
Wow.
And I did it in law and human rights, and I'm currently working at Te Kotahi Research Institute here at the University of Waikato. Currently we're doing work in Māori data and data sovereignty. And yeah, so
cool.
It's a good starting point.
Yeah, it is a good starting point. That's fantastic. So did you get into law and cultural law because why did you get into
I just sold my language school. I was an English language teacher for a long time.
Okay.
The industry was kind of collapsing, and I was trying to think out what to do at that time. And so I decided to embark on a new career. So I started going into law. But at the same time, I was also on a self-discovery. And it was during that period of time that I also understood myself as intersex.
Mm-hmm.
And so these two things kind of happened to coincide at the same time. So yes, it's been a long journey of self-discovery and understanding. Well, not so much discovery, but certainly understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of change to it's huge. So what age were you, if you don't mind me saying, when you started to go through all that?
So I would have been somewhere between maybe 2007, so I'd be 37.
Okay, yeah.
I talk about midlife crisis. That was...
Okay, so for people who don't know, I mean, I actually think that teenagers now are way more au fait with different, using different pronouns and different gender identities than even my generation is. But I will get you to just explain what intersex means.
Okay, so an intersex person is someone whose chromosomes, hormones, or genitals or gonads are not clearly definable as just either a male person or a female person.
Okay.
So there can be multiple combinations, or one part of that could be quite, I don't want to say ambiguous, but it's not clearly definable.
Okay.
And there's over 40 different variations that are listed as an intersex variation. Even currently, there's debate, though most intersex people would agree that even PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome,
I have
would also be an intersex variation.
That's interesting.
Because what causes those things are the hormones and the other issues in your body. And so these things are actually so it's hard to give an exact figure of how many we are, because doctors change us usually at birth or soon after, and the details are usually not kept. Parents are told not to talk to their children about it. And so that's why many of us find out about it later in life, because either at times of fertility issues or other times we go to the doctor and suddenly it's like, I'm not who I thought I was.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. I hate to use this as an example, but I was watching, was it Grey's Anatomy, and they were talking about the right of a child to choose for themselves when they're old enough to choose. Or I hate using the word choose because you don't necessarily have to, but the idea that that doctors and parents were making decisions and probably still are making decisions that are, I mean, affecting a person's life, for the rest of their life. I
Mm.
mean, some of it's pretty barbaric, as far as I'm concerned. But do you think do you think that's like has I mean, it must have changed a bit, but do you think it's still like happening that people are still not talking about it? And
Um, it hasn't changed too much, to be honest. It's they say that there is consent,
mm,
but parents are still told that it's a deformity. It's something that's just an abnormality that needs fixing,
right.
and so very few of these cases need immediate attention. Sometimes there are associated health issues that need attention,
Yeah, of course.
and some can be quite serious,
Yeah.
but none of them need sex assigning fixing, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense. And
Yeah.
once some of these surgeries have been done fixing their sex or correcting their genitals,
Mm.
it often leaves life trauma that goes for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
so yeah, so they've kind of decided that they're going to make decisions through multidisciplinary teams. So instead of one doctor making a decision, they just have lots of different fields of doctors making a decision. But from a
Right.
patient's perspective, i.e., an intersex person, it's still the same barbaric torture.
Yeah, it's still not their decision to make.
In my case, it was done supposedly to make me more male, which I
Right.
never felt that male when I was growing up.
Yeah.
We come to that part later. But basically, they said this will help them stand up and pee.
Right.
Now, after my life experience, I would wish they'd done nothing. I would have been happier if they just said it would be better if you sit and pee because you're going to have a few issues. It's like the realistic fact is I've got more problems because of what they did
Yeah.
than I would have if they didn't do it.
Yeah,
And
that's really
and to me that's a problem. And many for parents, unless they have full disclosure of information, which as a legal expert and someone who's done a lot of research, I can tell you that most parents are not given that much information.
yeah.
Uh, then parents don't have the actual right to consent.
Well, yeah, absolutely. If you don't have the full information, then you can't consent. I mean, that's what consent's about.
Just to throw out some figures there, the
Yeah.
best estimate we've got at the moment is roughly about 2.3% of the population are intersex.
Okay.
And this is just based on world medical data that we have available.
Yeah.
So I did a calculation, that's roughly the size of the city of Dunedin,
Wow. Yeah.
could be the number of intersex people. Yet in New Zealand, in the surveys we've done through the intersex Aotearoa, we've only got about 30 to 40 people replying. So that means there's a lot of people out there who are intersex, who don't know they're intersex, who may be desiring some support, but
Yeah, of
don't know.
course. They might not know. I mean, there's there's a possibility some of them don't want to. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of cultural shame around not feeling like you fit into what's, on the all of the pictures and whatnot. Actually, I just found out that apparently our organs, how we have, you know, the pictures, the medical pictures of what a body is supposed to look like and all the organs and everything. I just found out that that's total, I mean, it's not total bullshit. It's very general. And when I was getting an ultrasound done, the radiologist, I think they're called radiographer, was saying that your like pancreas can be in a completely different spot Like your organs aren't necessarily where they say they are on the thing, and everybody is different. So your liver could be right up in your lungs, or like like things can be completely different to what we're expecting. I've heard of appendixes not being on the left side or something. So there's a lot more variance than we've been let on to know
A-
about.
and that's a bit of a problem, and I'm trying to um, express to people with the concept of gender, because gender was created in 1955 by John Money,
Okay.
who's a psychiatrist who was born in Matamata, but he did his PhD over in the US
Okay.
at Johns Hopkins University. Now, he created the term gender because sex and its multiple understandings and of all the different areas we talked about were becoming too diverse. So it
Mm.
could not identify somebody as being male or female. So he was trying to identify, well, if we can't do that, what can we use to assign an intersex child as male or female? So he came up with sex assignment and then the sex of rearing the child in development.
Okay.
And together he coined the term for those two elements, gender.
Right.
And so gender was actually created to erase us as an intersex person and
Mm.
assign us to one of the two sexes, of which then medical treatment would be done to make sure that our anatomy can conform to the assignment.
Yeah. To fit.
And and then from there, Robert Stoller um, developed the term from sex role to this gender identity, of which now we use for transgender people.
Right.
But that was actually gender identity initially was a very highly medicalized element. Today, transgender people use it. I guess you could say they've claimed it as their own.
Yeah.
It's actually started as a very medicalized point. So
Wow.
when feminists talk about gender, it's actually, for some of us, it's actually a very traumatic concept.
Yeah, absolutely, because the language doesn't include everyone.
No,
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see our government becoming more diverse, but I still think we've got a really long way to go, um, with people being feeling like we're being represented properly. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I think as an intersex person, that's the trouble I face because we hear about all this diversity, like gender diversity, even
Mm.
rainbow diversity. But as an intersex person, I know our community has such a wide understanding of who they are. Some feel as though they're an intersex woman, some as an intersex man, some
Mhm.
as non binary. For me, I'm starting to consider to start reclaiming that word hermaphrodite because to me that has that spiritual connection with the past, with
Yeah.
that connection. But even then, it's a matter of decolonizing it because doctors and scientists have talked about it as this self-reproducing organism like a snail. But
Oh my
actually,
gosh.
that's not what that spiritual connection was about before. It was about that two natured, that dual natured being
Yeah.
of which I introduced myself about. And
Yeah,
so to me, it's about reclaiming that because I will always know for me, I can't speak for all intersex people because
of
they
course.
identify across that thing. But for me, I'm always going to have those two natures.
Yeah.
And my voice might sound one side, my appearance might look partly another side,
Yeah.
but I know within myself there's a combination of all of that that makes me who I am.
Yeah.
And so the law, even in this concept of diversity, is still not recognizing that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I was just doing a paper. I was reading about how in Maori culture, um, there, yeah, it was a paper, a study that was done on the idea of gender, um, and that it's the translation into English doesn't work because
uh,
in Māori, the idea of who you are is uh, probably even more seems like a duality, like you're talking about. The idea is not that you're one thing forever either. It's far more fluid.
mm,
Um, and how you present yourself is maybe, you know, one little part of that. And I actually think that that's absolutely uh, accurate to everyone. I don't think everyone,
yeah,
I don't think anyone is 100% anything. That's, I mean,
no,
we're all human beings. That's pretty much the only 100% we got, you know?
I can't. I have this diagram that take too long to find and show you, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like a globe picture, and I've got little elements looking at physical characteristics, psychological characteristics, social
Mhm.
role, sexual orientation, all emotional characteristics,
Yeah.
etc. And I've got maleness on one side and femaleness on the other side, and I just did a random kind of dots across these different elements. And I said, say to people, tell me, who is this person? And of
Yeah.
course, you can't tell because, and I say to them, actually, if we went through and we mapped everybody, very few would be exclusively fully male or fully female.
Yeah.
Our characteristics actually would, and if we're looking at all the different parts of our identity, would be a kind of mosaic, I think is the best word.
Yeah. Absolutely. We're
And
an
I
amalgamation
think
of
when you
everything.
think about that, then what it tells us is we just have to be identified for who we are
Yeah.
as me.
Absolutely.
I'm Rogena. That's me.
Yeah.
And once we start doing that, it's easy to, like, it just shows complete respect for the other person
Absolutely.
because, yeah,
Yeah. I completely, yeah. I've always thought it was interesting because particularly on things like Twitter and also in a couple of conferences I've been to, people have been starting to introduce themselves with their pronouns, which is interesting. I think some people find it really hard to deal with. I mean, whatever. I think you can learn anything. I just don't think that it being difficult for one person to like try to remember someone's pronouns is actually should be even part of the conversation. Because it's so much more important than that on the other side. But it's been interesting to see people talking about like how I would introduce myself being, you know, a cis woman.
mm.
Do you think that's actually helpful? I know you
Well,
can't speak on behalf of everyone. I'm just saying, just your opinion.
I respect the need for opinions, and as someone who's kind of in this mixed space, I think it's important. But the focus on just pronouns, I don't think goes far enough.
Okay.
We need a whole language. So, like I say to people, they is good, but what about uncle, aunt, what? Boy, girl, what?
Absolutely.
And so, to me, yes, I'm having a pronoun to respect people who are not just male or female,
Mhm.
absolutely important. And we should be respecting how people identify. But I think people have just rested on that alone. And to me, that's just not gone far enough.
Yeah.
So I think my bugbear is not so much with the pronoun. It's like when I'm talking to my nieces and that, and I say, "Well, what shall we refer to you as?" I've got no answer because our whole society's just stopped in midair, and it's yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only in it's you're either in one camp or the other in terms of referring to family members. I completely understand that. Because I've had that experience myself where I realized, oh, I don't know how to refer to this family member uh anymore because there is no word that isn't just assigning a label to them that is incorrect, that doesn't represent them. And I didn't, yeah, it's something you don't think about until I think you are speaking to someone else. Um, but yeah, it's actually it's funny because I think the English language is one of those is a language in which there aren't that many labels, names for different people or different parts of your identity. I know in French there's actually quite a few. I appreciate that. There's just a little bit more ambiguity, or I don't know what the word is exactly, but maybe a little more acceptance of things being more fluid and less just black and white than the English language tends to kind of be. So, but that doesn't mean we can't be creative. I mean,
No, and I think we've got the opportunity as a society to actually think, well, okay, let's be creative. We've
yeah,
adopted them, they, which is really grammatically incorrect, but anyway, we've adopted it.
yeah,
So
I've
why
had
can't
that
we just give it a go
conversation.
forward? Um,
Yeah,
but again, it kind of comes back to this thing about gender. Gender is this Western construct. It doesn't represent Polynesian cultures. It doesn't represent other First Nations cultures. It is this Western construct of what it is to be a male or female.
yeah,
And though some non-binary people consider themselves within the gender, for me, I believe non-binary is actually outside of gender because you're outside of that framework.
yeah,
Well, you could say you're in between it, but you're still not in it.
yeah. I also think there is an element now that's coming through, I think, particularly in younger people, where I'm noticing they're kind of, how would I say that? They're kind of like they're dismissing those labels. I think the idea is like they're kind of going, well, no, I don't fit into whatever the fuck you've created
Yeah.
for me, and I'm not going to pretend that I do, which is really is cool and really empowering. I like that. I know it's harder for some like people to understand, and I've had a lot of conversations with grandparents and whatnot, but I still think it's a good positive direction. Like at my daughter's school, there's a lot of kids that are non-binary, and I've been learning new names for people as well. Um, yeah, and yeah, it's an effort, but like seriously,
Mm.
it's not that much of an effort. It's
No,
the change that's hard for people, but
mm,
it's not difficult once you can learn anything.
no.
We all learned how to drive, for God's sake. Like you can learn someone's
I
change
mean,
of identity.
so this is pretty simple. We're not even talking. Learning to drive is complicated.
Yeah, I know. And dangerous. And this isn't either. What do you think of people who are afraid to, get the wrong pronouns or, to identify someone incorrectly?
Generally speaking, the way people express themselves should give a good clue.
Yeah.
Like, but my general suggestion is if you're unsure, just ask.
Yeah.
How would you like to be referred to?
Yeah.
That's I mean, that's a very polite way. But like I go to say in the mall, I go out to get some food or something, and fully in a dress, just kind of very feminine style. And
Mhm.
they'll go, "Oh yes, sir. What do you want?" And I'm thinking,
Really?
okay.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about you?
Um, Not that it's a bad thing, but they just assume I'm transgender
Okay.
because transgender people know more about being transgender than intersex.
Yes.
Um,
That's true.
Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with being identified as transgender, but um, so that's probably one of the biggest things.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I had a shaved head, people assumed I was a lesbian. And at first I was kind of I'm bisexual, but as at first I um found that quite off-putting, um, because that's not how I thought of myself. I also found it irritating because it was like, well, just because I don't have long hair, you're making some big ass assumptions, you know. That's why I've always found it really interesting, like people who have grow a big beard and are wearing dresses. I love that because that's kind of it feels like very much like a just like I'm whatever I am, and you can't make an assumption now. Like you just try.
The thing that I find worse is when we're going into the shopping mall or something,
Mm,
and I have predominantly it's white middle-aged uh, women, sometimes with the husbands, and sometimes they have the children, and you can hear them in the background talking behind your back. Strange, you know.
oh my God.
What kind of being is that kind of being? That's the thing that gets you the most. It's like we
Yeah,
can't
it's
go
horrible.
anywhere in public without someone looking around or making comments like that. And you can tell some of the mothers are going like, oh, we have to protect our children and that sort of thing. It's just like,
So it's catching or something. Oh God, that's so depressing. But, been walking around with people who got stared at for who they were, and I don't think people realize how obvious it is, and I don't think people realize how much of a how like traumatizing that could be for someone to like be walking
I
around their
mean,
everyday life and being
looking at
stared.
them is one thing, but once you start hearing them back chat behind you,
Yeah,
that's even it takes it to a whole new level.
yeah. Which is why I mean it's so important that there is more media representation of people who don't just like all
Mm,
look the same. Um, uh,
absolutely.
yeah, that's just because the more you see it, the more you start to kind of understand that everyone's different, and that's fine.
And what I find is the more people I talk to,
Mm,
but the vast majority of people I talk to are understanding. They
yeah,
just don't know. But
yeah,
once they do know, they go, oh, okay. And
yeah,
so I believe in my deepest heart that there's only a very tiny majority who are ultra conservative and don't want to know. I
yeah,
believe with education, most people will go, oh, thank you for telling me.
yeah.
Yep.
Like if someone was feeling like they were unsure as to whether they were intersex or not. I mean, you said you felt like you like something was up,
Mm.
but you weren't quite sure. What would you kind of advise, I guess? Where like I guess you talk to your parents or
Well, no, I didn't talk to my parents because
you don't?
I was in a kind of semi conservative home,
Okay.
Christian background. And I'm like, uh, no, don't bring
Yeah,
it
you
up.
know what the reaction's gonna be, yeah.
Um, and I'm now at the stage where I can talk to my parents, but for young people, I think it's important to reach out. So, like on Facebook, we've got Intersex Youth Aotearoa.
Okay.
So, for young people who are familiar with Facebook, there's a place that they can reach out to.
Okay.
And if they're not sure, there's no harm in asking. And if they kind of get it mixed up with transgender, um, the the people who are on the administrator they of that Facebook site, they can help and put them in touch with someone to talk through it. For many people, at most they're going to know is the name of their variation or what medical doctors will call a condition or a pathology,
Right.
like hyperspadias or androgen insensitivity syndrome. It's all classed in those medical words.
Yeah.
So someone might have that on their medical information, and they go, well, "What does that mean?" And
Yeah.
if they see that that's one of the intersex variations, it might help them connect and go, "Ah." A good
Yeah.
example of that is many intersex people are told by doctors, "Oh, there's no one else like you." So when we first meet an intersex person, we go, someone else like me. It's like you're finding a sense of community because you've been told you're special. You're well, not so much special. They don't use that word. They
No.
use more of a horrible word. But anyway,
Yeah.
so it's like you're unique. You're different. You won't find anyone else like you. You're just a abnormality. Whereas when we find there's others like us, we go, oh, wow, wow, and we kind of get so happy because we realize actually there's more of us out there.
I mean, not feeling alone is huge.
Mm,
It's like that you might be going through things that other people are going through is such an important connection to make. Um,
mm,
I didn't meet anyone who was bipolar until I was in my 30s. So,
mm,
or that was, I mean, I'm sure I did meet people who were bipolar. But the fact that you were talking about as well about PCOS before is really interesting to me because I have PCOS and I was given what do they call it? An anti-androgen to prevent like hair growth. So
mm,
like beard growth really.
mm,
Um and they didn't really talk about I don't know. A GP is very, they want to get you out within 10 minutes kind of thing. So they don't really talk things through necessarily. But no one ever really talked about the fact that maybe this is just what your body is doing and that's okay. Um,
Mm,
there isn't a lot of acceptance for, like you said, like for the range of experiences and identities that we have. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I had never thought about it in that way. I guess we're all in
because
boxes and we don't really know it.
absolutely. Now, this is will be a good one because most students will get this from their biology class.
Okay.
We talk about genotypical, as in genes your are XX or XY,
Mm-hmm.
or phenotypical, as in bodily expressions, using those scientific terms from genetics that everyone talks about
Okay.
in biology class. And a friend of mine came up with a good expression. Intersex people are genodiverse and phenodiverse because
Yeah.
they don't fit in that typical range. And I
Okay.
thought, well, that's a good way to help people understand
Yeah.
because most people have done some basic biology at school.
Most of the questions that I get so far are about penis size and whether they feel like they're normal. So that's a whole nother conversation. But
I
I
think
did,
I I think just to keep, put an answer in that, which kind of talks about a lot of what we're talking is
yeah.
there's no standard,
Oh, no.
and I think people doctors need to overcome this thing of the standard sized penis.
Mm-hmm.
There is no standard. And people with small penises, or what they call micro penises, not as much today, but in the past, they had them cut off and they were made into a female because it wasn't a standard sized penis.
Wow.
Even though their identity was still very male, they'd been tried to make into a female because the doctor thought they weren't standard enough.
Yes.
So we need to overcome that thing and just, you are who you are, be happy with your body parts as they are.
Yeah. I think it
How
takes
is that?
everyone time to accept who they are. I think that
Yeah,
that's a journey, absolutely. But it definitely helps if the people around you and the professionals around you are also accepting you and for who you are instead of trying to change you. I've also heard about like people who have very large clitorises being considered male. Um,
mm,
yeah, there's
yeah.
heaps more diversity. In fact, what I am going to do at some point, because I did see it on something, was I watched a very short documentary where they came up and they ended up putting a whole bunch of pictures of like vulvas, different people's vulvas, um, on the screen, and just showing how different everyone was so enlightening. And I think that's so important. I I just think it's so important to see the diversity, for lack of a better word. Um, yeah, so good, so interesting.
So hopefully we've got that penis question for whoever asked it.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So yes, I don't think there is a normal.
No,
I think it's just a label we've popped on people. All right. So one of the other questions was, how do I tell my friends I'm actually a girl?
that's a really difficult one. And the first thing I would say is you have to talk to someone you really trust, a good
Mm,
friend, someone you've built up really good trust with, because you need when you go to you need people around you who are really good friends who accept you before you start talking to too many people. Because if you
yeah.
don't have that, it can be really damaging. So the, it's hard to give individualized advice because
Of course.
everyone's going to be so different. But I think the best thing we need to start with is a few people around us who are really, really close and are going to support us no matter what. Once we have them, then it's easier to start talking to other people because you know that they've got your back.
Yeah. I mean, would you consider that talking about like is that considered as coming out? I know we use that in terms of sexuality, but um would you say that it's coming out?
I guess you would because that what that's doing is coming out is literally giving a public face
Mm,
to what you understand.
right.
Because before that, you're kind of hiding it inside. But
Yeah,
So
of course.
coming out is like a public
Yeah, definitely.
demonstration. Here
Yeah.
I am.
Here I am, everyone. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think in some families and in some social groups, like some friends, you'll have an idea if you've known them long enough. You'll have an idea of how they feel. You can
Mm,
test the waters a little. Like,
mm,
I don't think there's any shame in like bringing it up in a conversation just about, someone else, and seeing how they kind of react.
absolutely.
Yeah, especially in terms of safety, because I'm well aware that there is a safety issue in some social circles, depending on especially for parents, because when you're a teenager, you're still,
Yeah,
uh, you know, generally living at home. Um, just yeah, I think it is about being careful, finding your community. Sometimes you unfortunately have to wait until it is a safe. Um, you're in an environment where you're not gonna, be kicked out of home or be ostracized in a really traumatic way. But you can't choose
like
how people are going to react.
absolutely. And like you say, test the waters.
Yeah,
Like asking a friend, have you heard about transgender people?
yeah, yeah,
And if they give a real negative comment, then you know, I did.
yeah,
But if they go, oh yeah, I've heard about them, and then you
yeah,
can go, well, over years I've been, and so you can, as you say, you test the water, and you can know whether it's a safe space or.
yeah. A really good one, actually, if you have Netflix, is there's a show called Sex Education. It's a British show, and it's a really good show, just off the bat, but it's about teenagers in high school, and it's about them exploring different sexualities, different gender labels, and how different everyone is, and how it can take a long time to figure out who you are, even just for yourself. And that would be a really good show to be like, oh, have you seen this? And then, you probably get an idea of whether they um, are, on board, or maybe you should wait a bit, or maybe you should just tell them that they should like watch it, or just maybe you could like slyly like kind of educate them a little bit on the side. I don't think that would hurt, that's for sure. But
And
sometimes
that's the
people
thing.
disappoint you, unfortunately.
Mm, yeah. And sometimes the people you think are good friends, unfortunately, work out not to be the best friend once the truth comes out. But
Yeah,
over time, you learn who are the real friends and who are not.
yeah,
And what we need around us, especially when we're coming out of the real friends.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, if you can take anything from it, if you do lose friends, I've lost friends through telling people I'm bipolar and things. But I think the one thing you can take from it, even though it feels like a really negative, and it's something you have to process, is someone not accepting you for who you are.
mm,
Um, is that it's a really good litmus test, meaning that it's a really good way of testing whether someone's actually your friend or not. It's
mm,
as disappointing and as much as it can hurt. Um, I personally would rather know whether that person was a real friend or not. Um, doesn't stop it from hurting, for sure.
no, I mean, absolutely, it's going to hurt if you find that person's not a real friend.
Yeah,
But I think long term, your life is going to be better off
yeah,
to know than person pretend like they're a friend and stab you in the back behind you.
exactly. And we all know that when we're young, that I mean, even when you're older, to be fair, there's plenty of people who enjoy the drama. I would also like to just get out there that I think often when someone has a really negative reaction to something like that, um, sometimes, not always, sometimes they just need a little bit of time. Sometimes it's just their knee-jerk reaction. Um, and I remember I've brought him up a few times already because he's great. Dan Savage, who is a sex advice columnist in America, and he was saying that when he came out, he says that he gave people like a year, particularly his parents who are very conservative Catholic, like he's like, I gave them a year to ask the dumb questions, like the questions that are like, really? And then afterwards, he was like, and then after about a year, I was like, no, okay, I'm not answering these fucking questions anymore. This isn't it's not actually on me to educate you in this. Go Google it. Here's some books. Go do that. But I'm not accepting those questions anymore. They're not helpful, and you need to kind of, yeah. So I think giving people a moment to have maybe not the best reactions. Because a lot of it's to do with your culture. It's a lot to do with your upbringing, and especially when you're
Absolutely.
young, like what your parents say when you're 14, like yeah, it's a lot about your own education and culture. So yeah, you can. I think it's up to you, but I think it's good to give people the benefit of the doubt that maybe their first reaction may not be the best one. Um,
Absolutely.
and if they, apologize and kind of show that they're trying to figure it out.
I
Yeah,
think people, even if people get it wrong, if you can sense they are trying,
yeah,
you forgive them for that.
yeah,
But you can tell people who just not trying. You know who they
yeah,
are. But if you can sense they may be making a mistake or getting pronouns wrong or something, but you know they're trying, you sense that they're really trying to get it right.
yeah.
Then you give them some leeway because you know they're putting in that attempt. They're trying.
Exactly. If someone really cares about you, they will try. Please like and subscribe to this video if you'd like to be notified when a new episode goes live.